You wake up, sleep still in your eyes. Your hand reaches for your coffee mug. The spoon clinks against the porcelain. White crystals pour in. 1, 2, 3. You don't even think about it. Sugar isn't just an ingredient. It's woven into your memories. Grandma's pie, a school break, your first paycheck spent on a chocolate bar. It's in our language. Sweet life, sweet dreams, sweet revenge. But what if it's all an illusion? Imagine a lab. A screen flickers. A brain is scanned. A person swallows a spoonful of sugar, and the pleasure center lights up. The same one that ignites with heroin, with cocaine, with a bet at a casino. Dr. Lena Morgan proved it. The reaction is identical. Neurons don't distinguish between sugar and opioids. They just scream, "More!" But heroin is illegal. Sugar, however, is in your yogurt, your sauce, your bread. You don't choose it. It's added for you. Do you know that feeling? When you crave something sweet, not from hunger, but from anxiety, boredom, or emptiness. It's not weakness. It's chemistry, a dopamine trap. And you're not a victim in it. You're the market. Now imagine tomorrow, sugar is declared a Schedule I psychoactive substance. Stores close their aisles, candies are confiscated, cakes are banned. What happens next? Teenagers in basements inhale caramel smoke through homemade vaporizers. Cartels smuggle cane sugar across borders in contraband boxes, labeled organic stevia. Farmers in Brazil and Thailand fight for control over the last legal plantations. And on the black market, a kilogram of white sugar costs as much as gold. And your kitchen? It becomes a risk zone. A child's birthday party. Place for a dose transfer. Advertising disappears, but the addiction remains. Because the brain already knows sweet, carreau, safety. Sweet, carreau, love. Sweet, carreau, escape. Here's the paradox. We ban tobacco in movies, but we allow a character to stress-eat a donut. We fear opioids, but we give children juice with 20 grams of sugar per serving. And that's enough to raise the risk of death from heart disease by 38%. Not from obesity, but from chronic inflammation. From silent destruction within. Sugar isn't a taste, it's a system. And you're not a consumer in it, you're a component of the chain. Stop for a second. Look at your sugar bowl. What do you see, harmless sweetness or a disguised threat? Dr. Lena Morgan wasn't looking for sensationalism. She sat in the dim light of the lab, gazing at neural maps where sugar and heroin left the same trace, like two fingers pressing the same button. 3 times her team double-checked the data. 3 times the brain responded the same. It's the same thing. But when she submitted the article to Nature Neuroscience, the editors were silent for 2 weeks. Not because of the science, but because of fear. Because to acknowledge sugar as a drug would mean collapsing a system in which we all grew up. Imagine your brain as a slot machine. You press the sweet button, and you get dopamine. But if the machine pays out randomly, you play longer. That's how intermittent access works. In experiments, rats endured electric shocks, hunger, and fear for sugar that didn't appear every day. Now look at your yogurt, your soda, your healthy granola bar. The sugar in them is dosed to keep you coming back, not because you want to, but because your pleasure system is programmed for repetition. You feel great, no withdrawal, no symptoms. But every morning you put 2 spoonfuls in your coffee, every lunch with sauce containing 20 grams of hidden sugar. In the evening, a cookie, just because, total 30 grams, and that's enough for your heart to begin quietly deteriorating. Not because of fat, not because of weight, but because of the inflammation that sugar triggers in your blood vessels, like rust in pipes. You'll die, and no one will say, "It was sugar," because it hides behind the word delicious. Now look behind the scenes. Behind every crystal lies not a lab, but an empire. Sugar giants control supplies in 170 countries. They lobby for laws, sponsor research, and redefine norms. When, in the 1980s, science first linked sugar to obesity, the industry didn't refute it. It shifted attention to fats. And we believed. For decades, we ate fat-free yogurts, packed with sugar, thinking we were saving ourselves. Look here. Your kitchen is not a neutral zone. It's a battlefield. And every time you choose just a little something sweet, you're not just eating. You're endorsing a system that knows your brain doesn't distinguish between love and a spoonful of sugar. And as long as we call it taste and not addiction, we remain trapped. Not because we're weak, but because we were designed that way. Maria Ferreira packed sugar for 15 years. Then she read a memo. Never call it an addiction. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from rage. She knew every package, every label, every truck, a part of the lie. And her signature on the invoices, an accomplice. A year later, she was fired. 2 years later, she testified in a California court. In 2027, the jury said what science had whispered for decades: sugar is a Schedule I psychoactive substance. The sugar market is $90 billion. Cocaine is $6 billion. Sugar is sold in 170 countries. Cocaine, underground. But the effect on the brain, the same. You drink a Coke, your pleasure system lights up. Like a rat pressing a lever in a cage, only you're not in a cage, you're in a supermarket. And you think you're making a choice. In 2015, the WHO proposed no more than 1 spoonful of sugar a day. Coke responded, 118 million for lobbyists. That's 23 times the WHO's entire budget for combating diabetes. They didn't argue with science, they bought new science. Scientists for a fee, research on demand. The result? Millions of people still believe if it's fat-free, it's healthy. Your yogurts, your sodas, they're not food. They're a dose. Imagine, tomorrow, sugar is banned. What happens? Plantations in Brazil collapse. Farmers in Thailand riot. Teenagers in Mexican basements cook syrup from smuggled cane. Cartels smuggle caramel in boxes labeled stevia. And in Europe, the black market explodes. A kilogram of white sugar, more expensive than gold. Do you think this is fantasy? In the 2000s, tobacco was traded this way in the Soviet Union. History doesn't repeat itself, it scales. Sugar isn't just a product, it's an infrastructure, ports, trains, subsidies, elections. Banning it would collapse the economies of entire countries. That's why laws are silent. That's why WHO recommendations drown in lobbying reports. Because sugar is currency. And as long as it's legal, it's untouchable. But California has already said yes. And this isn't the end, it's the beginning. Because when the system recognizes that sweetness is a drug, it can no longer pretend it's just a taste. Neither can you. Look at your mug. Are you drinking coffee or getting a dose? Do you know that feeling, just one cookie? It's not weakness. It's a program. And you're not the user, you're the object. A courtroom, California, 2027. The mother of a teenager who died at 16 from diabetes looks at the defendants. Not at people, but at logos. The defense argues sugar is a carbohydrate, like rice, like bread. Harmless, natural. But Dr. Morgan steps to the stand and turns on the projector. Here's a brain on sugar. Here's one on heroin. There are no differences. The judge is silent. The room is too. An hour later, he pronounces, sugar is a Schedule I psychoactive substance. At that moment, the law changes, but the market doesn't. Why isn't sugar on the blacklists of drugs? Because laws don't see food. The 1961 International Convention targets heroin, cocaine, LSD, but not what's in your sugar bowl. Sugar is a food product, and therefore out of reach. It's not a loophole, it's a trap. To recognize it as dangerous, we must stop considering it food. And who would dare say that grandma's cake is a dose? In 2015, the WHO compared sugar to tobacco, directly, officially. Added sugar is a risk factor comparable to smoking. But instead of a ban, recommendations. Instead of warnings on packaging, fine print in the corner. Why? Because tobacco is a habit of marginalized people, and sugar is the language of love. Happy birthday without cake. I love you without chocolate. The system isn't afraid of the substance. It's afraid of losing meaning. But what happens when you ban what millions want? Prohibition knows the answer. Alcohol, opium, tobacco in the Soviet Union. A ban doesn't kill demand. It creates a shadow. And in that shadow, syrup is already being cooked in Mexican basements. Cane sugar is already being smuggled in containers labeled organic flour. Teenagers are already inhaling caramel vapor through glass pipes because the brain still screams, sweet, safety. Does this sound familiar? You don't choose sugar, you choose comfort. And the system has long turned comfort into a commodity. Look at your kitchen. It's not a room, it's a front. And as long as you call addiction taste, you're not paying with money, you're paying with years of your life. He's 17. He calls himself a sugarhead. By day, a schoolboy with a backpack and headphones. By night, a shadow at the back door of an old movie theater. The code word, caramel. Inside it's dim with bass music and the smell of burnt sugar, thick as fog. On the tables are glass tubes with ceramic filters, like artifacts from the future. He takes one, inhales. Sweet vapor burns his throat. A second later, a surge in his brain. The pleasure system lights up like neon. Pure. Instant. No calories, no packaging, no guilt. He used to eat cake. Now he takes a dose. And in this he finds his new identity. Does this sound familiar? Not the basements, but the desire for just something sweet at 3 a.m. The black market for sugar wasn't born out of panic. It grew from the same system that had been adding sugar to your yogurt for years. Former Coke lobbyists and sugar magnate managers formed the Dulce Sombra cartel. Their trucks carry laboratory reagents. Their documents are fiction. Sugar is packaged as stevia, as flour, as vitamin C. Through shell companies in Panama and Dubai, it reaches underground labs where it's transformed into inhalable caramel powder or capsules of pure glucose euphoria. Interpol intercepts shipments, but misses the point. Sugar isn't a drug, it's a raw material. And as long as it can be grown legally, a ban is just a new form of profit. In Mexico City, underground sugar cafes are already operating. No signs, no menus, just vapor, glass, and the silence after an inhale. 12,000 people a month. In Buenos Aires, teenagers exchange sweet cartridges like they used to exchange chewing gum. In Manila, police confiscated 300 kilograms of white sugar and couldn't find a criminal. Because the crime is now in the brain, not in the bag. Inhalation devices mimic e-cigarettes, but instead of nicotine, it's caramelized vapor. The effect lasts 3 minutes, but the brain remembers sweet, salvation, and demands a repeat. Do you think this is fantasy? Look at your mug. Aren't you seeking the same instant comfort? Once, sugar was given at weddings. Now it's hidden in pockets. Before happy birthday, Now quiet, it's forbidden. The culture of sweetness has been overturned. The desire hasn't disappeared, it's simply gone into the shadows. And it's become sweeter due to the ban. Crystals of white sugar now cost more than gold. And a spoonful isn't an ingredient, it's a key. A momentary bliss in a world where pleasure has been declared a crime. Do you still think you're choosing? Look at your hands. They're no longer reaching for cake, but for the basement door. Birthday, balloons, laughter, garlands, and a cake, huge with pink cream roses and golden candles. Grandma proudly places it on the table. Mom grabs it first. Her hands tremble. Her breath hitches. She throws the cake into the trash, not out of anger, but out of fear. The guests are silent. Someone whispers, "You know, it's like heroin now." Do you feel that cold in your stomach? Not from the scene, but from the realization the world where cake was a gift has disappeared. A generation raised on donuts and soda doesn't understand the panic. And children born after 27 look at old photos with cakes like they're tobacco ads from 55. "Happy birthday" now sounds with caution. "Sweet" carries a hint of danger. Families are torn apart. Some see sugar as a threat, others as a legacy. Do you feel this too? When your craving for a cookie evokes not a smile from loved ones, but anxiety. But where does this panic come from? Not from the law, from fear. After the WHO compared sugar to tobacco in 2015, social media exploded. Hashtags like "no sugar" garnered millions. People wrote, fatigue disappeared, blood pressure normalized. I can see clearly again. Documentaries showed how 25 grams of sugar a day increased the risk of death from heart disease by 38%. Not from obesity, but from silent inflammation. And then sweetness stopped being a taste, it became a risk. And here's where it gets interesting. In 2007, an underground warehouse exploded in Detroit. 3 people died. The investigation found not just smugglers. It turned out the Dulce Sombra cartel was led by former tobacco lobbyists. The very ones who had hidden the truth about cigarettes for decades had now switched to sugar. Their labs produced hyper-concentrated powder, 10 times stronger in effect than regular refined sugar. It activated the brain's pleasure system faster than cocaine. Remember Maria Ferreira? Her testimony in court was the beginning, but not the end. The sugar market is $90 billion, 15 times larger than cocaine. Billions still want sweetness. Only now, safe sweetness. The food industry is on the brink. It needs not just to replace an ingredient. It needs to reprogram taste, to restart trust, and to redefine pleasure. And you? For the first time in 100 years, you ask yourself, what if my craving isn't weakness, but an illness? Look at your hands. They still reach for something sweet. But now you know it's not love. It's a program. In a small lab in Austin, 3 scientists sit before a screen where a glucose level graph pulses. The liquid in the test tube is clear, odorless. One of them, a former diabetic, sips coffee. His hands don't tremble. His heart is steady. He looks at the monitor and whispers, "It's not sugar. It's freedom." Their startup SweetNo spent 5 years wrestling with a formula that doesn't activate the brain's pleasure system. It doesn't deceive. It doesn't trap. It's just sweet. Without consequences. Without debt. Without withdrawal. But while they celebrate a breakthrough, corporations have already rewritten recipes. Cola is now sweetened with fermented chicory root. Cookies with microbial proteins grown in bioreactors. Marketing has shifted, not sugar-free, but pure delight. To check if a new dessert causes cravings, Companies hook up volunteers to fMRI scans. If the nucleus accumbens, the reward center, doesn't light up, the product goes to market. You eat a cake and don't want more? Does this feeling sound familiar? No, because it didn't exist before. But here's where it gets interesting. Salvation turned out to be a new trap. Dr. Lena Morgan and her team at Princeton discovered some healthy substitutes suppress leptin, the satiety hormone. The brain doesn't get the enough signal. You eat and feel no limit. These substances are sold under labels like for kids, organic, safe, the same tactics as tobacco lobbyists in the 60s. Only instead of filter removes tar, it's scientifically proven purity. Do you think this is your choice? Look at the packaging. Fine print. Long names. You don't read, you trust. And trust is the currency of the new era. The industry knows. You won't believe in delicious anymore, but you will believe in safe. And then the world gathered. Not in a courtroom, not in a lab. At the first global summit on sugar addiction in 2028. Not as a health crisis, as a threat to stability. Because when pleasure becomes a weapon, food, a battlefield, and sweetness, currency, borders crumble not from wars, but from habits. Your morning coffee is no longer a ritual. It's a test for freedom or for a new addiction. You decide what you pour into your mug. But remember, even pure sweetness is still a program, just written by others. Geneva, 2028, a conference hall, 170 delegations. Dr. Lena Morgan stands at the podium. In her hands, a volume of data. On the screen, a brain lighting up from sugar like it does from heroin. Next to her, a Brazilian minister. His fingers tap on the table. 12% of his country's GDP is white sugar. Behind him, an Indian representative. In his country, sugar is part of rituals. Refusal, desecration. Someone demands a ban. Someone prescriptions. Someone legalization as medicine. Do you feel this tension? It's not a debate. It's a division of the world. 72 hours later, a global sugar pact is born, not a ban. Regulation. 5 grams a day, maximum. Licenses for production, prescriptions for purchase, schools, sugar-free zones. But pharmaceuticals, yes, for depression, for palliative care. Every ton on the blockchain. From field to hand, GPS, biometrics, report. Sugar is now like a weapon, not banned, but locked away. Do you think this is a victory? It's a compromise, and it's fragile. Because Cuba didn't sign, Thailand, no. Mauritius, Dominican Republic, Haiti, also no. For them, sugar is bread, not a drug, a ban. Poverty, mass starvation, loss of culture. They form an alternative sugar alliance and sell legally under the guise of cultural heritage. The black market becomes white. In their ports, sacks labeled traditional food are loaded, and in Europe, possession means arrest. Do you see the paradox? Now, sugar isn't a health issue. It's a matter of geography and money. The rich get their dose through nutritionists. The poor, through smuggling. Diplomats, at banquets. Teenagers, in basements. The world hasn't become cleaner. It's become more complex. Inequality now smells of caramel. Look at your mug. Are you drinking coffee or participating in a new order? You're not given a choice. You're given the illusion of choice. And until you understand, pleasure is politics, not taste. You'll remain in the system. Not as a consumer, as a resource. Everything we've discussed isn't fantasy. It's a chain reaction. Science has proven sugar activates the same pleasure system in the brain as heroin. Economics has confirmed its market is 15 times larger than cocaine's, and it permeates 170 countries. Crime has seized on the ban and created the Dulce Sombra cartel, where former coke lobbyists now cook caramel powder in Mexican basements. Culture has redefined sweetness as a threat. Industry has replaced refined sugar with microbial proteins and neuro-neutral substitutes. Politics has introduced licenses, prescriptions, GPS tracking for every ton. But none of these layers would have worked alone. Only when science, money, fear, power, and habit converged at one point, your hand reaching for the sugar bowl, did the world begin to tremble. A teenager stands at a basement door. Caramel smoke seeps from underneath. Inside, music, laughter, glass tubes with ceramic filters, the dilated pupils of friends high on a dopamine rush. He pulls a packet of harmless sweetener from his pocket, a gift from Dr. Morgan, after rehab. He looks at the door, not out of fear, not out of morality, but because for the first time he understood pleasure isn't something that takes you away from reality. Pleasure is the right to choose. He turns around, leaves, and in that moment he becomes an adult. And now, the twist. We're not afraid of sugar, we're afraid of ourselves, of our inability to stop. But what if this immoderation isn't a weakness, but a sign of life? What if the desire for sweetness isn't a program error, but a reminder? You're not an algorithm. You're a body, a heart, a memory, the smell of grandma's pie, the taste of the first apple, the warmth of a cup with honey. That's not a drug. It's a language humanity has used for centuries to speak of love. Maybe the problem isn't in the crystals, but in the fact that we've stopped trusting ourselves, our hands, our language, our right to moderate happiness. A ban isn't protection. It's an admission. We no longer believe we can live with pleasure without destruction. Look at your mug. Are you drinking coffee or participating in a system where every gram is an ethical choice? You're not given an answer. You're given a question. And it goes like this. Do you believe sugar should be banned as a drug, yes or no? Write in the comments. Not because it's important to us, but because it's important to you. Your voice isn't an opinion. It's a brick in a future where sweetness is either forbidden or free. You decide. Right now.